Hello, New Zealand. Don't get confused. I know it's Wednesday night and we're normally here on a Thursday at 5, but Simon and I are busy packing our bags because we're off to the ARC conference in London next week. And Simon, looking forward to that. I've got a little promo video which I think we'll show at the end of the program. So just to get you excited about what you're going to. It's actually my second time. But anyway, good evening to you, Simon. What are you cooking for dinner tonight? Important question.
I think actually we've got some a brisket or something in the slow cooker, which I had to run down to deal with because you won't be able to hear it now because I turned it off, but it was loudly beeping through the house. So that's what's for dinner on this muggy, hot Auckland day.
Okay, and look, Lynette's coming straight away. Hello from Christchurch. How are you, Lynette? You can comment. You can do it on our Facebook page, Family First Facebook page. And you can also do it on our YouTube account. You may be watching on LinkedIn and Twitter and other Facebook pages. And I mean, we are everywhere, but if you want to make a comment and you want it to come through to us so that we can see it, then it needs to be on the Facebook page for Family First or on YouTube. Right, we're going to get straight into it, Simon, although I might just hats off to the people of Wanaka for stopping McDonald's coming into their town. I mean, what are they thinking? I was actually down there. Was it last year? We were doing a public meeting on the RSE, the Relationship, Sexuality and Education program in schools. And afterwards, we went to try and have a feed somewhere. It was about 9 o'clock and all the restaurants were closed. It was very hard finding food. And to be honest, a little bit of Macca's might have actually been quite nice. So I actually wonder if Peter Williams is behind all of this and he got it shut down himself. What do you reckon, Simon? Is he in Wanaka?
It could well be. I know the people of Tirau are also fighting back. I think it's a McDonald's or a Burger King's trying to open there. So, yeah, right. Depending whether you are a Big Mac lover or a business freedom type person, it's an interesting debate.
Okay, speaking of Peter Williams, he will be filling in the hot seat while you are away for a slightly extended period, going to visit some of your rallies over in the UK. So we've got Peter Williams in the hot seat and we've also got Rodney Hyde in the hot seat, and then you'll be back. But we will be going back to Thursday night, our regular slot of 5 o'clock on Thursday night, because that's when Parliament rises for the week. So we've had to do this on a Wednesday night simply because of travel plans. So that's what all the bags in the background behind Simon are as he trips up as he comes into the studio.
No, those are the bags on my eyes for being worked too hard.
Okay, let's have a look at the latest political polls. And look, the media got all excited about it. Look, it's kind of neck and neck. One news poll says that National and Labour are basically neck and neck, Green and ACT are neck and neck. So that's kind of the left and the right. Te Pāti Māori and New Zealand First are neck and neck within margin of error. So what you actually see, this is the Courier poll, which was just before that. Once again, if an election was held today, New Zealand, National and Labour would have equal number of seats. It's pretty even split between the left and the right. I think probably this graph was the most interesting that I had a look at. I'll just enlarge that a little bit. That black line represents when the election was. So you can see National has dropped a bit. And you can also see Labour has increased, and also the Greens. Yeah, the Greens have had a bit of a plummet there down the bottom, and Active sort of recovered their loss. So there's some interesting trends amongst all of that. So Simon, you've been in the political game for a while. Is anyone taking notice, given the fact that we're not even halfway through the current parliamentary term?
Oh, they'll definitely be taking notice. Politicians, they do. This is their lifeblood in a strange way. Yeah, they do. Just trying to think of how to say it any more articulately. They follow this, they discuss it, they worry about it, they talk about it in the corridors, they'll talk about it in the evenings amongst close friends. This is the lifeblood of politicians. And it partly is fascination, but part of it too is just simple worry, and it's what both on the left and the right precipitates often leadership changes or changes of direction. So yeah, they are. And look, the key point too, if I might, you rightly point out the Labour and National are relatively neck and neck, and you know, you can take a positive spin on that. But, realistically, you'd expect a first-term government to be doing better. And to put it really bluntly, National should be, and I've said this before, I've said it almost since election day, they should be in the 40s. National, that is. And yep, I know we can make the arguments for some listeners, well, the overall centre-right package is okay, and that's all right, but actually National should be much, much higher.
Okay, I mean, I'm just interested on that comment that you made. So if you go slightly to the left, to where the red is at the highest point.
Never.
So that's when Jacinda, basically won a majority vote. And then it was just a free fall for the next 3 years. So, I mean, is that totally true that a sitting government, if anything, everybody's watching them very closely, and so therefore they're most likely to come under attack? I mean, it's very easy to be in opposition, isn't it, and to make out that you would be the best government, whereas the current government are the ones where you can actually measure. It's much easier, much more objective measurement, isn't it?
Yes to all of that, although I hope I said earlier a first-term government. So again, the National and obviously its coalition partners, they're just over a year or a year and whatever months in. I would expect, to personalise it should be a lot higher. You're absolutely right. As time goes on, it does drop away. That's why we end up with changes of government. But we're just over a year, Bob, of a new government replacing a recklessly unpopular Labour Party. And yet here we are, looking at your graph there, moving back to the right rather than moving to the left. But on the right, National and Labour are coming close together. And it beggars belief because, of course, Labour hasn't changed. It hasn't changed its leadership, hasn't changed its policy. Academically, it's quite remarkable. Personally, it's quite worrying.
Speaking of leaders, and actually Gillian says, Kerry stopped McDonald's coming in for several years, but McDonald's won out in the end. Smiley face. I'm not quite sure if that's a smiley face because she agrees with the decision and likes the quarter pounder or not. But there we go. Now, you mentioned leaders. So preferred Prime Minister, Luxon has dropped. Chris Hipkins raised by the same amount. So still Luxon ahead. There's Chloe, David Seymour. So basically those are the parties voting for their own political party leaders. The media have spent a lot of time saying that Luxon is increasingly unpopular. I've got a view on that, and I know you have as well, Simon, but I just wanted to show you this graph first. And it just, on the left-hand side, it shows that just after the honeymoon of the election, Christopher Luxon was on 25%. He's now on 22%. So he's only dropped the margin of error, 3%. And Chris Hipkins was on 15%, and he's now 17%. So, in fact, not a lot has changed. But would you say that a Prime Minister on 22% favourable rating, even though the party is getting 34%, so the party is 34%, but the leader is 22%, is that a problem?
It's actually, it's a really good question, but it's actually quite a difficult one for no other reason than it's sort of hard to explain. Look, it's not ideal. You always want your leader to be higher, but you've intimated one of the reasons. The media from day one have attacked Luxon. Attack. The man can barely do anything right. And on the flip side, Hipkins, as I say, he was the Minister of Health during COVID. He was the Minister of Education. He was the Prime Minister briefly. You can lay a lot of blame at his feet, and yet the media barely ever remind people of that. So there's certainly the media treatment is in play. But I think there is a correlation between leader popularity and the popularity of the wider party. And so National does have a bit of a problem here at the moment. And part of it too is those gentlemen to his right, Seymour and Peters, know how to hoover up media time and distract from Luxon. So it's a complex answer, but it's not ideal. Again, we're only a year in, or just over a year in, and that's probably my key point here. It should be higher.
Okay, now, just in terms of economy, and of course, it's the economy stupid was the famous line. The direction the government is heading, 39% of us say in the right direction, 50% say in the wrong direction, and the 11% don't know. But then they also asked, what's the economic outlook? Is it better or worse? The green line is better and the red line is worse. So that's interesting because, basically a lot of us think things are slightly better, but at the same time, we don't like the direction the government is heading in. I guess you could include other issues around health, crime, social issues. So once again, Simon, what's the politicians going to be thinking with those two graphs?
These ones this one here will give them some encouragement that people are feeling a little bit more positive. But the other graph around right-wrong direction, look, that's the critical one for members of parliament, or certainly for political parties.
Yeah.
And if you continue week after week or month after month that you are in the wrong direction, then you're in trouble politically. So put really simply, it was clear before Labour lost because of this poll, or polls like this. So again, it's problematic for the government at the moment. This is no longer a one-off. We've had several of these. As I've written before, and we've spoken before, including here on Political Playback, we don't need the coalition to panic, but they should be taking notice of it. And part of it, you nailed it, there's still issues in health, there's still issues with crime, people are still feeling the cost of living. But I suspect part of it too is they want a clear, decisive government and a leader to be taking control. And that's probably not what they're seeing. That's probably one of the bigger problems here. They don't feel that there's strong, bold leadership happening.
Okay, well, that segues perfectly into the comment that I was going to make to see whether you agree with. And look, here's my analysis. The reason that National are at 34, but Luxon is at 22, is because a lot of people are watching the way Trump has acted over the past 2 months and have seen what a Conservative leader actually does when they become a political leader. And they're looking at Luxon and saying, what has he done in terms of the gender confusion? What has he done about dudes wanting to play in women's sports? What's he done about anti-Semitism? I mean, he says he's going to lock up Benjamin Netanyahu if he comes to the country. There's a whole lot of, the whole climate alarmism. So my view is that Luxon has to start acting a little bit more forthrightly in the same way as the new right-leaning leaders have done in Argentina and in Italy and in Hungary, or else, he might get rolled. I mean, that's not a prediction. I'm just wondering.
Oh, it's possible. Look, let's be clear. If the polls continue in a southward direction, there will be change. It reaches a tipping point. Politicians in any party know that rolling or changing a leader or a major policy shift comes with big risks. But if things are getting really bad, they get desperate, and I would argue probably begin to act irrationally. But I think you're right. Ultimately, Chris needs to, as in Luxon, needs to really just get that resonance with the public, which just is not there sufficiently. And people can disagree with that. They're very welcome to, but we do see it in the polls. When it's contrasted with other leaders who are very dominant and just being forthright, the contrast is very, very clear. And slogans don't cut it. Not turning up to Waitangi doesn't cut it. Letting your junior partners dominate the headlines doesn't cut it. There needs to be quite a lot of work here to show that, in this case, that National Party is the dominant political party and its leader are in control. And until that time, things are going to slide. And you're right, Trump's a major contrast in this.
Okay, well, that was a very good segue because Rosie asks this question: should David Seymour be sacked after trying to drive a Land Rover up the steps of Parliament despite being told not to? Very good question. In fact, let me just show you the evidence of that.
And found organisers told Seymour not once,
we've been told to keep off the steps,
but twice,
we've been told by security that we cannot go on.
And he still hit the gas.
They said that these guys can't, but I said, well, what are they going to do? We'll bring me before Privileges Committee for driving a Land Rover?
Okay, now it's part of a charity fundraiser. Is any what's the saying? Bad press is still good press. I mean,
Yep.
everybody's talking about him. Is that a good thing, even if it's a negative talk?
Yeah, for him, it's the bread and butter for these minor parties, and Winston and Seymour are both brilliant at it. At the end of the day, their names in the newspapers. Yep, people will. Sorry, I better back that up. Most people won't read the why; they'll just see his name and Peter's name.
Yeah.
By the way, Peters wasn't driving the Land Rover, but Winston knows how to catch a headline very, very swiftly. Because what was it? Was it last week or the week before? Oh, that's right. Shane Jones's Mexican comment. They didn't resolve from it. They loved it, and they stirred it up because, again, day after day, they're getting mentioned. And the flip side of that, of course, Bob, is that, in this case, other parties are not. So this was a very deliberate decision, I would argue, by David Seymour. And look, it's not a sackable offence. To quickly address Rosie's point, I think we don't want to be in that space where stupid, silly behaviour by MPs leads to their sack, and I think it has to be a very high bar. But this is just classic Seymour.
Okay, actually, I just want to make a little theory here, and I want to go back to this graph, and that is that the Greens have actually declined. Now, sure, they've had a lot of bad behaviour, but actually they haven't declined as much as I thought. What was it in the latest graph? They'd held their ground at 10%. It was something that I just put in our notes that you probably saw, and that is that actually Chloe and Marama Davidson, I mean, she's now back in Parliament, but the Green Party have been very quiet because Te Pāti Māori has been stealing all the oxygen for good or for bad. And so the Greens have been starved of oxygen, of being heard. I actually think that's why they're holding their current polling, because nobody's heard from them, but the more they start speaking out and we hear some of their wacky ideas again, then I think their polling's going to drop. So there's my prediction, Simon. Hold me to it. The next poll that comes out, I think because Marama Davidson is starting to speak up again and Chloe is speaking up, and we're going to see an example of that shortly, that the Greens are going to drop in that poll. Anyway, do you want to hold me to that? Do you agree with that prediction?
Oh, we'll hold you to it. I mean, my very quick observation is there is the core Green voters, but your first comments, I think, very accurate. The likes of the Māori Party are actually absorbing a lot of that radical side now. The Greens were always the radicals. Now they look pretty tepid compared to what the Māori Party is suggesting, and so that's affecting things. But they'll always have their core base. And the other fact is I don't actually think Chloe and Marama are working as a leadership team, and I'm not suggesting there's ructions, but they just don't have that.
I am.
Traction.
I am.
Yeah. Oh, you are? Ah, all right, there we go.
There's
Inside
a power
knowledge.
play there. Oh, yes. Yeah, no, I don't think they're friends at all.
Oh, I think you're right on that. And it's just, but I suppose the further point, so you did right. I think the further point, though, is they're just not finding a way to get their message across. And, put it really simply, Chloe's no longer the new person on the block. She's been there a long time, hasn't delivered much. We've all heard the way she speaks. It's no longer novel.
Yeah. Okay, interesting comment here, which I'll just show you. Albert says Seymour's Land Rover stunt is demonstrating he's a real bloke. Good on him. Actually, who was the National MP who also did that? He drove a tractor right up the stairs and he got away with it. Who was that?
Yeah, it was Shane. Oh, my Lord, he was the MP for King Country.
Yeah.
Oh, it's terrible. I've forgotten his last name.
Somebody will tell us.
Shane Ardern.
Shane Ardern. Oh, there was an interesting surname.
I think it was,
Okay, no relation.
Those
Actually,
were the days.
Yeah, but speaking of, real bloke, but speaking of negative press, there was some positive press for David Seymour, whether you like him or not. He did give, there was a media stand-up at Waitangi, and I just want to show this clip because it's quite funny. So this guy called Guy Williams turns up. He pretends to be a comedian, but he also wants to try and create a documentary, which is actually being funded by you, the taxpayer, believe it or not. And so he turns up to this stand-up media conference. Now, have a watch. There's a few naughty words in it, so I'll try and beep them out. But you'll see the disrespect that Guy Williams shows for David Seymour, but David Seymour gives as good as he got. And David Seymour then says he wants to take a question from Simon Wilson. Now, for those who don't know, Simon Wilson is a far-left commentator from the New Zealand Herald, so there's huge irony in the fact that he's asked that. And I don't know if you saw Simon, but Gavin Ellis, who used to be the editor of the New Zealand Herald, I think it was, Gavin Ellis said Guy Williams turning up to this media conference and pulling off this stunt was a slight on the whole profession. It just wasn't on. Anyway, have a quick watch. It's quite funny.
Quoting Shakespeare, I hope that's not offensive to you, but pouring poison in one's ear is a quote from Hamlet about putting mistruths in people's minds, and I believe that's what people have done about my bill.
But a lot of people are saying that's what you're doing. You're spreading misinformation.
This is Guy
Can you give
Williams.
me an example?
You're trying to say that Māori are causing divisions and racist when it seems like that's what you're doing.
No, I've never said that at all. I've said that...
You have said that.
When?
Many times.
No.
I mean, on the tiles. Don't lie to me.
No, I've never said that at all. That's why you're not a real journalist. These guys are. And what I have said consistently is the idea that the treaty formed a partnership between races. That is inherently divisive as an idea.
You don't really believe this, though. Like, you're saying I'm not a real journalist, but even I can see through this bullshit. Like, you're spinning shit. You've started a debate.
You know, it's worse than that. You're not even a real comedian.
Okay, well, that's fair.
But I'm getting it.
For a second, I feel like you're setting the narrative and then saying everyone who argues with you is an idiot, when really people have been very clear about their arguments, and you're being dismissive because you want to control the narrative, and you're not in it for ideas. You're in it for asset sales and for creating division to win political votes. That's what I think.
You know, when I grew up as a kid in this country, comedians were funny, they were clever, they were witty. What's gone wrong?
I think I'm all right.
Yeah, I know. You're the only person who thinks that.
Politicians were a bit more honest.
Simon, you got a serious question? I mean, it's so bad, I got to get Simon to ask you a question.
I mean, you got to love it. Whether you like David Seymour or not, and like his policies and that, he does really deal with the media quite well. And, of course, Winston does as well. And I think you were developing that skill as well, because you just start to lose tolerance for kind of the questioning that comes even from pretend journalists like Guy Williams.
Yeah, well, I mean, a couple of very quick points. You're right. I mean, actually, it's a very witty series of responses by David, and actually he's very good at it. He's very, very good at that. But it is a bit of a shocker that likes of Guy is there. Yeah. He's not funny. He's clearly trying to bait questions. And I'm trying to think, I've forgotten the person's name, but it was a year or so ago. It might have been around COVID and mandates or something, but someone turned up to question from a second level media platform, I think. Long and short, got turfed out and refused to be engaged with, I think it might have been Jacinda who dealt with it. And yet, you know, here's Guy Williams just been allowed to remain there. It was a shocker. He shouldn't have been there in the first place, and not because of what he questioned. It's just not appropriate. Yeah, just being silly. All right, let's get into the next topic, and it does talk about sort of the fabric of society. The Salvation Army have put out their State of the Nation report today, and I guess the strength of this report is that they've done it for so many years now, is that they've done this consistent trend that you can look at. So there's some consistency to the data. Look, I just want to show some graphs, and Simon, if you do want to comment on them, then yell out. But these are just a few of the graphs that I saw in this report that I think should be a bit of a wake-up call for us. So the first one is this one. This is child abuse, and you will see there that over the last 5 years, serious assaults have increased by 73% with no injury, and with injury 30% increase in the last 5 years. That's despite this miraculous anti-smacking law, which was supposed to stop all this. Hospitalisations have increased. This is for children for abuse or neglect. And of course, hospitalisations are a objective measure of actual injury. High school attendance. I mean, that massive drop-off, sure, from COVID, but it is still super low. We just haven't recovered the ground. It's almost as though kids have developed that habit. Just jump in, Simon, if you've got a comment on any of these. Yeah, well, I didn't want to interrupt your flow. I mean, I suppose there's a couple of quick thoughts. And look, obviously this is a lot of data. There's a lot of nuance. But, you know, this is first and foremost, you know, and you and I talked about this earlier, you know, how's the great woke or progressive experiment working, people? And you've got more graphs to come, but it's clear it's not working. Secondly, you mentioned the anti-smacking. Thirdly, the experiment with a whole range of family dynamics. You know, at the end of the day, the ideal, and I really want to underline that because there are different family dynamics, but the ideal is the biological mum and dad looking after their child. And I can't help, nice mug there, by the way.
Are you talking about my face or the cup?
Oh, no comment. No. So, when we step away from this, should it surprise us that there's more child abuse? Are we surprised that there's more hospitalizations as a response? Are we surprised that children are not attending school? Are we surprised that educational outcomes are not as good? And we shouldn't be surprised. No. So those are my very, very quick comments. And now I will get my mug.
Okay, a couple of other ones. The pregnancy for 15 to 19-year-olds has dropped, although a little comeback, unfortunately. Unfortunately, the abortion rate...
pregnant people?
Pregnant people, yes, that's right, 15 to 19-year-old peoples.
Sorry.
I just
couldn't
wanted
resist.
to show... I know, you can't help yourself. Unfortunately, the Māori teenage girls are more likely per head of population to get pregnant, which is, part of the difficulty with family formation, which Lindsay Mitchell has identified in a number of our reports. As you said, Simon, that family formation, the high psychological distress on the increase, and of course, Jonathan Haidt at our conference last year talking about the effect of screen time, perhaps playing into that.
I was going to quickly jump into it. I think Jonathan's work is incredibly important as to what Family First has been leading in this space. There's a clear correlation between that greater access of devices and what kids are able to access, how they're interacting with one another. It's just going to get worse, actually, until we reverse those dynamics around devices.
The suicides... is it decreasing? It's kind of like just fluctuating around a median, but you'll note that the lighter green line is non-Māori. So non-Māori are more likely than Māori, 15 to 24-year-old to have suicide ideation, commit suicide.
Tragically, actually, it's a lot of, often, I believe, and I'm happy to be corrected, but if my memory serves me right, the predominant number of youth suicides is actually young European men. I think that's more in absolute terms, Bob, but that doesn't often get reported because, of course, when you have an intersectionality framework, which our media does, that's not a convenient stat to share.
Yeah, that's true. Females are more likely to attempt suicide, but fortunately not achieve it. But guys are less likely to do it, but they will generally always succeed. They're more likely to achieve what they set out to do, which is, very sad. Police proceeding, just crime, victimisation, the top line, the dark blue line has increased, and yet the proceedings, which is the light green, the third one down, is decreased. So to me, that's sort of saying that victimisation, crimes have increased, and yet proceedings, actions taken against criminals seems to be decreasing. I did just look...
There was definitely, very, very quickly, I mean, this was one of our suspicions, and particularly in the last government, as they tried to clear our prisons out, that there was a unwritten request into the judiciary to be a bit more cautious, and that probably went into the prosecution service. I better be clear, I can't definitively prove this to people beyond the stats. You've got more victims, you've got arguably more crime, and yet somehow our courts are doing less. It's like... something doesn't add up.
I did want to just show this one because I just looked at what criminal acts have had a massive increase, and you'll see there the second one down, basically assaults, acts intended to cause injury, massive increase, almost 60% over the last 5 years. So that's where the crime has increased. Family harm, once again, a massive increase over the last 5 years. Now you'll note there it says the 1 year is 0.2, so it's kind of held its own over the last year, but overall, over the last 5 years, significant increase in criminal activity leading to family harm, which of course is a major concern. But the sad reality, and I've just circled European and Māori there, unfortunately, once again, family violence in Māori families is the victims. It's significantly higher for Māori victims than disproportionate to their population. So there's issues there.
Yeah, there is, unfortunately, and like everything, Bob, it's very complex, and I better be clear to viewers, I don't have any great crystal ball, but my observations are we're not acknowledging, as we said at the start, a lot of those family dynamics, multiple partners, family breakdowns, and so forth. And the other is, I think we just keep going to the old tired excuses. A lot of blame is often put on, I'll be blunt about it, colonization and other things. And yes, I'm sure it has an impact. But the more we keep trying to put the blame, if you will, over there, I don't think, various people, doesn't matter if it's Māori or European, are not looking a bit closer to home about what's happening. Yeah. So a very inarticulate way of saying the old excuses don't wash anymore. There's clearly more happening here, and that has to be addressed.
Yeah, and one of the arguments that's made in our reports about family structure and some of these negative outcomes is that you've got a higher proportion of, unfortunately, Māori as having teenage pregnancies, and then you're having low marriage rates amongst Māori compared to non-Māori. So therefore, family formation, they're immediately coming in under this pressure. And then, of course, you've got this family violence disproportionate. So the families are under significant pressure, and therefore you see these negatives. Drug use, once again, cannabis, it's still 15%, and this is any use in the last 12 months, I think it is. Unfortunately, that light blue line is MDMA, so the party pills are on the
they're
increase,
making a comeback, aren't
sadly.
they?
Yeah.
But is that a surprise? Bob, this is more your area of expertise than mine, and by research, I better be clear to viewers than anything else practical. There's a media push for this, along with the Drug Foundation, is it the testing groups? You often see that they just continue to push and normalise, particularly the use of the likes of MDMA, or ecstasy, as we colloquially know it.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. And look, there was a classic editorial in the New Zealand Herald this morning talking about the fact that the police they were concerned about shop owners being robbed, and they said we need to take minor crimes and we need to come down hard on that so that people don't graduate to greater crime. That's the exact opposite to what they say about drug use, that we shouldn't be prosecuting any drug use despite the health harms and the addiction and the family harm that can result from that, and the crimes that are committed to feed that drug habit. And so they're contradicting themselves. So, the media certainly push liberal use of drugs. We shouldn't be penalising people for it. Just one last graph. And I just show this just to explain, so this is gambling machines in an area, the number of pokie machines, and the left-hand side is the posh areas, and the right-hand side is the high deprivation, poorer areas. Look at where all the pokie machines are. They're targeted at our most vulnerable. And I remember that was one of the arguments that Ronji Tanielu made during the cannabis referendum when he was in this debate with Helen Clark. And he said, we've already got alcohol shops and we've got pokie machines targeting our people. Why do we want drug shops as well? And Helen Clark didn't have an answer for that. But of course, it was a very relevant issue. Look, overall...
Just by the way, we've talked about it before. I'm sorry to jump in. It's a poor tax. It's one of the things. I used to be the Shadow Minister for Internal Affairs, and what did shock me is, as this graph shows, is just how many are in the poorer areas. And ultimately, they take a lot of money out of those poor areas because the funding from the pokies, all those community trusts which run them, the money doesn't often go to that community sports team. Some does, but it ends up going off to other suburbs in those wealthier areas. So it's a bit of a poor tax. But unfortunately, the current government has liberalised things in this space, including online gambling. So, bigger issues to come, I suspect.
Yep. So anyway, have a look at that State of the Nation report. I think there's some interesting trends there, but certainly in some of the areas that we are looking into. All right, let's move on to the next topic, and fascinating graph. And this is from the facts.nz, which is a superb website. We encourage you to have a look at that. They just put up for the facts, just research and polling. And they asked this question. They said, so there's this huge debate around the treaty principles, Bill. And they said, and this is a research done by Horizon Research on behalf of the Human Rights Commission. And so the Human Rights Commission wants to know, who do people trust with their for their data about the Treaty of Waitangi? And I just want to enlarge this and show that the media, it was 15%, and sorry, Simon, members of Parliament, even less.
I'm a former. I mean, I'm clearly very trusted now.
At 10%, but that is incredible. I mean, the AUT study suggested that only 33% of us trust the news media, but on this issue, which has had huge oxygen through politicians and through the media, only 15% trust the messaging that's coming through.
Does it really surprise you, though, in that when you think of, look, the treaty issue, the current debate is fraught, like so many things, there's nuance, but the media, or the mainstream media, have taken a very clear position on it. And, granted, Guy Williams is not a real journalist, but his attack lines are really just the same as a lot of mainstream journalists. Yes. And so I think people are switching off. Yeah. Just in terms of where are people looking, National Library of New Zealand, Waitangi Tribunal, podcasts, of course, that's Solid Ground, McBlog, and Political Playback. Absolutely.
And Human Rights Commission. I mean, interestingly, Simon, we've noticed that since there's been a change at the top, there's actually some good statements coming out of the Human Rights Commission. It's almost as though they're concerned about all human rights and not just left-wing radical ones, which is kind of weird.
I know. How radical is that? I will just make this comment, though. I don't know, despite what we've said about the media and politicians, I don't know how much I trust this poll. I mean, to be honest with you, how many people even know the National Library exists? And don't forget, they blocked Professor Paul Moon from giving a lecture this month because he dared to quote a British Colonial Office statement from, the 1800s. I mean, it's just, I wouldn't trust the National Library as far as I could throw it. But I'm just a bit surprised at who's supposedly at the top because, that's just my comment.
Okay, well, I'll just put the focus on the fact that the media are so low, 15%, which I thought was just quite shocking. Boy, it's a real poke in the eye for the mainstream media. Although, just to reassure everybody, you'll note down the very bottom there is social media. So, everybody's worried about disinformation and misinformation on social media. It's okay. New Zealanders have discernment. They look further than just that, and they can figure out what is right and what is wrong. All right, let's keep moving on and talk about the Cook Islands. Look, my wife and I were in the Cook Islands in December, and I had no idea that the Chinese were actually there as well. If I'd known, I would have, gone and said hello and just asked them what they were up to. But of course, the Chinese or the Cook Islands are entering into this possible deal. Now, just before you comment on that, Simon, because I know foreign affairs is one of your pet topics, just Helen Clark, for the first time I actually agreed with her because she said that, I know, mark this time and date, 12th of February, 5:42, that the Cook Islands should have been upfront with New Zealand on the agreement. But then, on the same day, Nick Minute, Nanaia Mahuta, who used to be the foreign minister under Labour, said, actually, no, it's paternalistic for New Zealand to think that the Cook Islands, who we give funding and support and residents and, there's this relationship to, they shouldn't have to consult us. So who's right and wrong here, Simon?
Oh, you're paining me to say this, but Helen Clark is more right. Look,
5:43,
really quickly,
12th of February.
Yeah, that's right. Look, at the end of the day, the Cook Islands has quite a special relationship with the realm of New Zealand. Cook Islanders automatically become New Zealand citizens. We give enormous amounts of aid. We facilitate defence, humanitarian assistance and so forth. So it's long-standing that actually both countries engage with one another. And let's be blunt, we're the bigger partner. And so, New Zealand doesn't have to go running off every 5 seconds to tell the Cooks what we're doing, but we do expect the Cook Islands on areas of international dynamic that they should be. Secondly, I'm not convinced this is the Cook Islands as much as various leaders, and this is unfortunately and worryingly very similar to the Solomon Islands, where basically, in the Solomons case, corrupt leaders got into bed with China. Third point, this is not in the Cook's interest, and yeah, you can call me paternalistic, but signing up any form of agreement with an autocratic communist state is not particularly helpful. And the fourth point, this is definitely not in New Zealand's interest. We don't need an autocratic communist regime having influence into the Cooks. And that's the final point. And this is the fraught one, because there are some people, because I've been posting about this, just kick the Solomons out, revoke citizenship, stop all the funding. Yep, you can make that argument. But actually, we don't want the Cook Islands to go closer to China. But Cook Islanders should be very aware that actually, if their leaders, for whatever reason and motive, take them much closer to China, there should be some consequences, including the whole dual passports, or rather the fact that they're New Zealand citizens with all those privileges. We have a special relationship. And Mark Brown, the Prime Minister of the Cooks, seems to be playing a very dangerous game.
Yeah, certainly is. All right, time for one more topic, and it sort of touches on two things. I'll start with the second one first, and that's the uniforms in schools. Once again, I think we have this every time. I mean, my personal view is better to have a uniform, because that's the only thing they can wear, and you don't have to buy all the trendy clothes and the variations that everybody wants. They just have the one uniform, maybe two copies of it, so to speak, not copies, but two jumpers, two skirts, two pants, whatever. And it's very simple, and it takes away a lot of the peer pressure. And I mean, there's a cost if you go mufti. So once again, there's this big push. Are people basically saying the government needs to be funding uniforms as well?
It seems to be. There was an article, was it last week, about this, talking about the cost of uniform. And look, everything costs. I would agree with your point, Bob. I'll put the cost of a uniform against the cost of the latest trendy gear that your kids want to wear. But I couldn't help but think, as the media were reporting this, the sob story of how much it costs, that it was just that first salvo that, just like school lunches, the government has to step in, and that's the worrying thing for me. And I don't know how much this directly relates to the Sally's report or not, but you know what? Parents are handing over so much responsibility for their own children. The children are to be given breakfast by the state. The state is to provide lunches. The state is to provide sanitary products. The state is to babysit your child when you can't get there at 3 o'clock. They're meant to do the uniforms. I mean, basically, should we just hand the child over to the state at 3 and ask them to deliver us them back when they're 18? The answer, of course, is no. Okay,
and we did touch on this last week, but just the lunches. So the lunches in schools are still an issue, and the Greens were trying to make... I've just got a couple of clips from the House from last night, and also I just want to show you how the media are coping with this one, which is not well. But firstly, just Chloe versus Winston. Chloe turns up with 3 of the meals on her desk. Apparently, Simon, you're not allowed to bring props into the house. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're not meant to, or they have to be used judiciously. You can stand up with an aid and show a graph. So judiciously is the short answer.
Okay, well, watch the Speaker of the House's reaction after this. But this is Chloe versus Winston.
Is the Prime Minister aware of how many of these lower quality lunches procured by his government are now ending up in landfill as a result of them being inedible?
Point of order, right honourable Speaker. Since when, in standing orders, is a member allowed to bring their lunch to Parliament, let alone having taken it from a school child? Since when?
I haven't seen that. That's actually quite clever.
Well, Luxon jumped on that one and used it again. Have a watch.
Will the Prime Minister then commit to eating the same lunches that he is forcing on our school children, like one of these 3 that I have bought for each of the leaders of his government? And if not, is there one standard of acceptable food for parliamentarians and another for our children?
Well, I'm more worried about which children are missing out on those lunches that you've nicked them from. Supplementary question, the Honourable David Seymour.
Is the Prime Minister aware that the people delivering the Healthy School Lunch Programme, the School Lunch Collective, are highly qualified and skilled in delivering food, unlike Chloe Swarbrick? And if he knew that, would he be surprised to hear feedback that we've received, such as, quote, received our first lunches from the new lunch programme today and the students and staff were very impressed, exclamation mark. Lunches arrived on time and they were nice and hot and students said they were filling and had flavour, end quote.
Yeah, okay. So they were pushing back on Chloe. Now, just before you comment on this, Simon, the media, I think, are just really trying to create this division between Seymour, Peters and Luxon. And, you know, Christopher Luxon was supposed to be having this meeting with David Seymour because David Seymour's been a naughty boy. Just have a watch. I just, as I was watching it last night, exasperated. One News's coverage, Mikey Sherman. These are the three questions she put. Just note the tone.
Being in the low 30s, does that destabilise your leadership? The pair had a meeting last night.
Did you tell David Seymour to pull his head in?
What do you say to members of the public who look at this situation and think that you're being undermined by one of your own ministers?
Okay, so just full in the face, just throwing accusations. Interestingly, on Stuff or 3 News, Gina Lynch asked the same question. Have a listen.
We had a very constructive and positive meeting last night.
Did you tell him to pull his head in?
We had a very good meeting last night.
Did you tell him to pull his head in? So that's the kind of way, I mean, is that the normal way that reporters speak to politicians?
Yeah.
This kind of,
It is.
It's almost changing room talk, you know, boys talk.
It is, and there was a time it was much more respectful, but what you just shared there has been quite normal for most of my political career. I think, to be fair on actually the reporters, there's a little bit of blood in the water, and like sharks, that they're beginning to circle. So expect to see more of this. Expect to see more of it. It is disrespectful and so forth, but you'll see more of it. Just quickly with the Seymour stuff, actually, Rach and I have had one of the school lunches today. Not ourselves. We don't take food from children.
What, you stole it off
like
a kid?
Chloe does, but
yeah.
No, never stole it, but brought home. Actually, to be honest, it's not that bad. I think this is just cheap politics. This was not as if there was a 9-course degustation menu for children at school before the current government came in. The food doesn't actually appear or taste that bad. And the other very quick point, if I might, Bob, and it's one of my pet hates, they're not our children. Okay, I've got my children and you have your children. They're not our children. And that's a very left-wing comment from Chloe, as if they somehow own other people's children. I wouldn't mind if they just butted out, actually. It would help. Yeah.
Okay, New Zealand Kiwi thinks it's disgusting and rude questioning, rude tone. It's just kind of the lack of respect and just the kind of gotcha and aggressive that sort of racked me up a little bit. Nancy Margaret says, thanks, great topics of concern to any reasonable person. Glad the media is not the government. Well, maybe they're together. Well, they're trying to keep each other. Simply Green says, no more red wine and beef steak lunches. I don't think anybody was having that, but anyway.
Not the kids. Not the kids.
And this is an interesting one. This could be a whole topic. Kirstine says, when will the mainstream media funding run out? Have they been sucking on the US aid? Which apparently there has been funding from the US coming into some of our mainstream media. Somebody told me that apparently the Spin-Off had received some. So, well, there we go. Okay. Right. Let's move on. And look, just before we go, I just wanted to play this clip for you, being an ex-politician yourself. Apparently in the UK, the current Minister of Health just got sacked because they found out what he'd been saying on some WhatsApp groups. So who's our Minister of Health at the moment? Oh, Simeon Brown. So Simeon, yeah. But anyway, so the Minister of Health in the UK has just been sacked, and so Keir Starmer has just appointed a new one. It's the Women's Minister, Ashley Dalton. The only problem is that while she was the shadow Women's Minister, she says that trans women aren't male, they're women. So she thinks that trans male are women, even though she's the Minister for Women. And they found that she, a couple of years ago on Twitter, somebody asked her whether she thought people who identified as llamas should be taken seriously, and she replied yes, and treat you with dignity and respect. So anyway, a politician turned up to the UK Commons last night and asked this question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the new Health Minister has stated that it's okay for a human being to present as a llama. So what I want to know is if I have a family member who presents as a llama, suddenly becomes ill in the middle of the night, do they send for a doctor, a vet, or a straitjacket?
Yeah, anyway, so the Labor government isn't going too well, and that was one country that I think we identified last week that hadn't swung to the right recently, but I think it may not be far. In fact, I saw a poll this morning that says that Nigel Farage's party is actually out-polling the Conservatives. Anyway, we're not supposed to be talking about overseas politics on the show.
Just ultra quickly on that, ultra quickly, because I always get excited about foreign affairs. They haven't swung yet because there's no election, but actually the Labour Party, Starmer's gone even lower. Farage and the Conservatives are higher, but of concern for the Conservatives is Farage and the Reform Party. But as a segue, if it helps or not, of course, Nigel Farage and Kemi Banadoc are at that conference that we're about to head to, and I think you and I might actually be doing lunch, sort of a lunch forum with Banadoc. So I'm actually looking forward to hearing, and if the chance presents, to meet. But there's big changes coming. Same in Australia. What's his name? Albanese. The polls are going south. Big changes coming there too.
Okay, let me just show you exactly what we're going to.
We're going to bring together, I think, the best slate of speakers that's ever been organized for any conference anywhere.
We each have a cardinal and irreplaceable role to play in the destiny of the world. We have the responsibility to face an uncertain future with faith and courage.
We are convinced that decline is not inevitable, that there is a compelling, hope-filled vision for the future.
But we know that it's not only the time to renew our civilization, but that it is possible to renew our civilization.
From the dawn of time, human beings have had to work to make the world a better place.
We're doing this at scale in our stadium event in London in February with 4,000 people gathering.
I am only what I say I am, and I can define myself completely. The ultimate extension of a narcissistic liberalism.
We're here to talk about the fragmentation of society and the future.
To explore what good governance might really look like and how free markets and human innovation can be combined with good governance to ensure human flourishing.
Could we not have a future of unlimited abundance and opportunity for everyone? Is it not possible that we could aim at that? That is what we could have if we chose to do it.
The family is the building block of society, but family breakdown has become epidemic.
We need to harness the power of technology to serve and not subvert the human being.
We split the atom, we spliced the genome, and we connected the world through microcomputers that fit in our pockets, that allow us to do amazing things.
Reliable energy, affordable energy, and low emissions energy. There are trade-offs in this very real world that we have to work with and deal with. Wouldn't that be nice if we could just have some civil dialogue?
We have the capacity, if we conduct ourselves properly, to make the best of anything that presents itself to us, to make the very desert bloom. We're sovereign citizens. We have responsibility for our own destinies. If we take that on, there's nothing we can't do.
This is my plea to be engaged, to man your station.
Welcome aboard the Ark.
There we are. That looks quite exciting, Simon. I hope you're looking forward to it. I went to the first one, and it's nice to be taking you to this one.
Yeah, look, I'm very much looking forward to it. Those are just a hint of some of the speakers. We've actually had John Anderson, he's the Deputy Prime Minister on one of our Family Matters. People can look that up. He was the clearly Australian-sounding man at the end. And the woman talking is Philippa Stroud, and the pleasure of meeting her in the past as well. Let's see if you or I can get a selfie with Jordan Peterson, shall we?
Especially if he's wearing that jacket. All right, we're out of time. Look, we've gone way over time. Somebody did message just to say when's Straight Talk back. It's back Monday week, so the 24th. When I get back from the UK, Simon will be slightly behind me. He's on a slower plane, but that will be back Monday week for Straight Talk. Anyway, that's the end of Political Playback. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of it. Safe travels to you, Simon, because you fly out before I do. And we will be back in 2 weeks for Political Playback. There might be someone slightly different to Simon sitting in the seat. We'll see.
Better.
You reckon? Okay. Anyway, have a nice dinner, Simon, and thanks for watching.